In 1980, two brothers quietly bought so much silver that the global price exploded. Banks panicked, governments intervened, and within days, billions of dollars vanished. They weren't hackers, they weren't politicians, just two brothers from Texas who believed they had finally beaten Wall Street. This isn't just a story about greed, it's a story about fear, and how fear can move entire markets. The 1970s were not kind to America. Inflation was rising, oil prices were exploding, the Vietnam War had drained confidence, and the U.S. dollar, once trusted worldwide, was losing its power. In 1971, President Nixon made a historic decision. America abandoned the gold standard. From that moment on, the dollar was no longer backed by gold. It was backed by trust alone. And for many wealthy Americans, that trust was breaking. Nelson Bunker Hunt, William Herbert Hunt, sons of H.L. Hunt, one of the richest oil tycoons in American history. They grew up surrounded by wealth, power, and influence. But they also grew up with a warning. Their father believed one thing deeply: paper money is fragile. The Hunt brothers didn't trust governments, they didn't trust central banks, and they certainly didn't trust inflation. So they looked for something real, something tangible, something the government couldn't print. Gold would have been the obvious choice, but gold was heavily controlled, highly regulated, closely watched. Silver, on the other hand, silver was different. It was used in industry, in photography, in electronics, and it was still considered a commodity, not a threat. To the Hunt brothers, silver wasn't speculation, it was protection, a hedge against a collapsing dollar, or at least, that's how it started. They didn't rush, they didn't make headlines. Instead, the Hunt brothers quietly began buying silver. A lot of silver. Physical silver. Silver futures, silver contracts across global markets, London, Zurich, New York, month after month, year after year. The price began to rise, slowly at first, almost unnoticed. But behind the scenes, something dangerous was forming. By the late 1970s, silver was no longer abundant. Supplies were shrinking, prices were accelerating, and whispers began spreading through Wall Street. Who is buying all the silver? Traders looked at the numbers, then they looked again, and suddenly the answer became clear. Two names kept appearing over and over: the Hunt brothers. By 1979, silver was no longer just rising, it was exploding. And the Hunt brothers were no longer just investors, they were becoming something far more dangerous. They were becoming powerful enough to threaten the entire system. Wall Street had noticed, and it was about to respond. By 1979, silver stopped behaving like a normal commodity. It didn't rise gradually. It didn't pull back. It went vertical. What had once traded for under $2 an ounce began racing past 10, then 20, then 30. Every week brought a new record. For the Hunt brothers, this looked like confirmation. They weren't manipulating the market. They told themselves they were right. Right about inflation, right about the dollar, right about silver. But Wall Street saw something else, a market losing control. The media couldn't ignore it anymore. Newspapers ran bold headlines. Silver prices soar. Who's behind the silver boom? Television anchors spoke with urgency. Analysts argued live on air. Some praised silver as the ultimate hedge. Others warned of a dangerous bubble. And quietly, behind closed doors, banks began asking an uncomfortable question. What happens if this doesn't stop? By late 1979, the Hunt brothers controlled an astonishing amount of silver. Not officially, not on paper, but in reality. Between physical silver and futures contracts, they controlled nearly 1/3 of the world's deliverable supply. That meant one thing. If they demanded delivery, there wouldn't be enough silver to go around. The market wasn't just tight, it was trapped, and everyone knew who held the key. Banks began to panic. Brokerage firms ran risk models day and night. If silver kept rising, losses would be catastrophic. Margin requirements exploded. Phone calls flooded trading floors. Wall Street had seen bubbles before. But this was different. This wasn't driven by hype alone. This was driven by supply control. And that scared the system more than anything else. Then, the rules began to change. Quietly, at first. The commodities exchanges raised margin requirements. Suddenly, traders needed far more cash to hold positions. Then came restrictions, limits on how much silver one group could control. Officially, these were stability measures. Unofficially, they were warnings. The message was clear. This has gone too far. In January 1980, silver reached its peak, nearly $50 an ounce, an unthinkable number. On paper, the Hunt brothers were billionaires many times over. They had done what few believed possible. They had beaten Wall Street, or so it seemed, because markets don't collapse at the bottom, they collapse at the top. And the higher silver climbed, the more fragile everything became. What came next would destroy fortunes overnight and rewrite financial history forever. In January 1980, Wall Street made its move. The rules were no longer shifting quietly. They changed overnight. The commodities exchanges announced a drastic decision. From now on, traders could only sell silver. Buying was restricted. No new positions. No fresh demand. Only exits. To the Hunt brothers, this was unthinkable. The market they had played by for years had suddenly changed the game, and without buyers, prices have only one direction to go. Silver didn't fall, it collapsed. In days, prices dropped from nearly $50 to the 30s, then the 20s, then lower. Every dollar down triggered margin calls. Banks demanded cash immediately. The Hunt brothers had built their position using leverage, borrowed money. Now that leverage was turning against them, fast. March 27, 1980, a day Wall Street would never forget. Silver crashed again. The Hunt brothers could no longer meet their margin calls. Losses were spreading across the financial system. Brokers feared defaults. Banks feared contagion. This moment became known as Silver Thursday. For a brief moment, the entire commodities market stood on the edge. If the Hunts failed completely, others would fall with them. A full collapse was narrowly avoided. Banks restructured loans. Emergency arrangements were made. But for the Hunt brothers, the damage was done. Their silver empire was gone. Billions of dollars erased. What once looked like genius now looked like recklessness. The market had survived. They had not. The story didn't end on the trading floor. Regulators stepped in. The Hunt brothers were accused of attempting to manipulate the silver market. Years of legal battles followed. Fines were imposed. Assets were seized. Once among the most powerful men in America, they were now cautionary tales. Their influence permanently broken. The Hunt brothers weren't villains, and they weren't fools. They were men who believed too strongly that they could outlast the system. But markets are not just numbers. They are rules, power, and psychology. You can bet against inflation. You can bet against currencies. But betting against the system itself? That comes with a cost. Silver returned to being just another metal. Wall Street moved on. But the lesson remained. No one controls the market forever. This is a historical documentary, not financial advice. Like, share, and subscribe for more true stories.